She gave birth to black triplets and then told everyone they died. 27 years later, they walked into her elite car event, richer, louder, and wearing her green eyes. When one said, "Hi, mother," she almost dropped her champagne. Now take a breath and enjoy the story. Rose Powell gripped the champagne flute tightly, her knuckles whitening as she scanned the crowded showroom of the Atlanta Luxury Auto Expo. 27 years of carefully constructed lies threatened to crumble around her as she spotted them across the room, three identical men in perfectly tailored suits, their confident smiles identical as they shook hands with the CEO of the most prestigious car manufacturer in Europe. "What's wrong, Rose? You look like you've seen a ghost," her husband, Spencer, whispered, placing a concerned hand on her lower back. Three ghosts, actually, the thought flashed through her mind, unbidden, bringing with it a wave of dizziness that nearly made her drop her glass. "Could we step outside for a moment? I need some air," she managed to say, her voice barely audible over the ambient jazz and excited chatter of Atlanta's elite. How could this be happening? Rose had made absolutely certain those babies would disappear from her life forever. That had been the deal, the only solution her family would accept when their perfect daughter had returned from college pregnant by a man they deemed entirely unsuitable, not just any man, but a black scholarship student with no family connections and no fortune to speak of. The shame and scandal would have destroyed her family's standing in Atlanta society. "Are you certain?" her mother had asked at the hospital after the triplets were born, three perfect baby boys with their father's warm brown skin and Rose's green eyes. "Once you sign, there's no going back." With tears streaming down her face, 20-year-old Rose had nodded and signed the papers, convinced by her parents that this was the only way to preserve her future. The babies would be adopted separately by three different families. She would never see them again. She would return to school, graduate, and eventually marry someone suitable, someone like Spencer. And that's exactly what had happened. Rose had built the perfect life, married to a successful investment banker, active in all the right charities, mother to two beautiful blonde daughters who attended the most prestigious private school in Atlanta. No one knew her secret, no one except her parents, who had taken it to their graves. But now, somehow, against impossible odds, all three of her sons were here in the same room as her, successful enough to be mingling with the ultra-wealthy at an invitation-only luxury car event. "Rose, are you listening?" Spencer's voice broke through her thoughts. "I said Martin Davies wants to introduce us to the Harrison brothers. They're the talk of the financial world, triplets who started with nothing and built an empire. Apparently, they've just become major investors in Aston Martin." Rose's heart pounded so loudly she was certain everyone around her must hear it. The Harrison brothers. Of course, they wouldn't have her last name. Of course, they wouldn't even have the same last name as each other if they'd been adopted separately. But somehow, they had found each other, and now they were about to meet her. "The tallest one, Colin, is the financial genius," Spencer continued, completely oblivious to his wife's distress. "The one with the glasses, Donald, is the tech innovator. And Martin, the one with the scar on his eyebrow, handles their public relations. They're remarkable. Raised in completely different circumstances but reunited in college when they discovered they were triplets, separated at birth. Their story is incredible." Rose felt the room spin as Spencer took her elbow, guiding her toward the three men who were now looking directly at her. The one called Martin whispered something to his brothers, and all three sets of identical green eyes, her eyes, focused on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Mrs. Powell," Martin said as she approached, his voice smooth and controlled. "We've been looking forward to meeting you for a very long time." The knowing look in his eyes told Rose everything she needed to know. They knew exactly who she was, and this meeting was no coincidence. As the crowded room seemed to fall away, leaving only Rose and the three sons she had abandoned, one thought consumed her: how much did they know, and what did they want from her after all these years? "Perhaps we could speak somewhere more private," Donald suggested, adjusting his glasses with a deliberate motion that reminded Rose painfully of their father. Jackson had made that same gesture whenever he was uncomfortable but trying to appear confident. Rose nodded mutely as Martin signaled to a staff member, who promptly guided them to a secluded VIP lounge away from the main showroom. Spencer, sensing something significant was unfolding but completely unaware of what it was, followed with a puzzled expression. "Rose, do you know these gentlemen?" he asked as the door closed behind them, leaving the five of them alone in the luxuriously appointed room. Before she could respond, Colin stepped forward, his imposing 6 feet 3 inches frame making the already small room feel even more confined. "Your wife gave birth to us 27 years ago, Mr. Powell. Then she signed papers giving us away to separate families. We're her sons." Spencer's face drained of color. "That's impossible. Rose never had other children." "We met in college, and I was 20 when it happened," Rose interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sophomore year at Emory, before I met you." Spencer stared at her in disbelief. "In all our 24 years of marriage, you never thought to mention you had 3 sons." The silence that followed was deafening. Rose looked at each of the triplets' faces, searching for some sign of the tiny babies she had held just once before they were taken away, Donald with his thoughtful eyes behind stylish glasses, Colin with his commanding presence and analytical gaze, Martin with his charismatic smile now replaced by a carefully neutral expression. "My parents forced me to give them up," she finally said. "They threatened to cut me off completely if I didn't." The father was, she hesitated, the old prejudices still difficult to voice even after all these years. "Black," Martin finished for her, his tone matter of fact, and a scholarship student, not for money, completely unsuitable for the daughter of Judge Hamilton Blackwell and his socially prominent wife. Rose flinched at the accuracy of his assessment. "How long have you known about me?" Donald took a seat, motioning for the others to do the same. "We found each other by accident 10 years ago. Colin and I were both at MIT in different programs. Someone mistook me for him at a campus event, and when we met, well, discovering you have an identical twin is quite something. We found Martin a year later," Colin continued. "He was at Georgetown. Once we confirmed we were triplets through DNA testing, we hired a private investigator to find our birth parents. It took years," Martin added. "The adoptions were closed, the records sealed. We had to fight through a lot of legal barriers. We found our father first, Jackson Lewis." Rose's heart clenched at the name she hadn't spoken aloud in decades. "Jackson, is he?" "He died 4 years ago," Donald said quietly. "Car accident. He never knew about us." Tears welled in Rose's eyes. Despite everything, she had loved Jackson once. "I'm sorry. He was a good man." "Better than the family that made you throw away your children because of the color of their skin," Colin said sharply. Spencer, who had been silent, suddenly stood. "I need a moment." He walked to the other side of the room, staring out the window, his posture rigid with shock. "We didn't come here to destroy your life," Martin said, his tone softening slightly. "Though we certainly could have approached you years ago when we first found out who you were." "Then why now?" Rose asked, wiping away tears. "Why here, in public, with my husband present?" The triplets exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them that spoke of years of deep connection, a connection that should have included her. "We built our company from nothing," Donald explained. "M3 Ventures started in my garage 10 years ago. We specialize in AI-driven investment algorithms and sustainable technology integration for luxury brands. We're not just attending this event," Colin added. "We're taking a 20% stake in Powell Financial's luxury automobile investment portfolio." Rose's breath caught. "Spencer's company?" "Yes," Martin confirmed with a slight smile. "We've been negotiating with your husband's firm for months. He just didn't know who we really were." Spencer rejoined them, his face composed but still pale. "You orchestrated this entire situation," he said, understanding dawning. "The investment deal, the meeting here today. Business and family are both about long-term strategy, Mr. Powell, Colin replied. We learned that lesson early. What exactly do you want from me? Rose asked, her voice stronger now as she regained her composure. Initially, justice, Donald admitted. We thought about exposing everything, how the daughter of one of Atlanta's most prominent judges had 3 black sons she abandoned because her family couldn't bear the scandal. Rose closed her eyes, imagining the headlines, the destruction of her carefully built life. And now? She asked. Now we want to know who we are, Martin said simply. Where we come from. Jackson told his sister about you before he died, but he knew almost nothing. We have questions only you can answer. Your daughters don't know they have brothers, Colin observed. Yvonne is at Yale now, isn't she? And Jean just started at Princeton. The mention of her daughters sent a chill through Rose. Leave them out of this. They've done nothing wrong. Neither did we, Donald said. Yet we grew up without a mother because of your choice. The tension in the room was palpable. Spencer moved to stand behind Rose's chair, placing a hand on her shoulder in quiet support despite his own evident shock and confusion. Our adoptive families were good to us, Martin continued. Loving, supportive, but we still grew up with holes in our identities that couldn't be filled. I understand you must hate me, Rose began. We don't hate you, Donald interrupted. We spent years angry, yes, but hate requires energy we'd rather direct elsewhere. Like buying shares in your husband's company, Colin added with a hint of the ruthless business acumen that had made the triplets millionaires before they turned 30. Which brings us to the real reason for this meeting, Martin said, leaning forward. We're hosting a charity gala next month for adoptees' rights and family reunification. All of Atlanta's elite will be there. And you want us to attend? Spencer asked incredulously. We want you to co-host, Donald clarified. Publicly acknowledge us as your sons, Rose. Not with the full story if you're not ready for that, but at least as children you were forced to give up for adoption. Rose felt dizzy with the implications. Such an acknowledgement would raise countless questions, trigger speculation, and change her standing in her social circle forever. Yet, looking at these 3 remarkable men, her sons, she felt a longing she had suppressed for nearly 3 decades. If I refuse, she asked quietly. Then the deal with Powell Financial falls through, Colin stated flatly. And while we won't actively expose you, we won't protect your secret either. Atlanta loves gossip, Mrs. Powell. How long before someone notices our eyes are exactly like yours? Spencer's hand tightened on Rose's shoulder. That's blackmail, he said tensely. We prefer to see it as negotiation, Martin replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. As the triplets stood to leave, Donald placed a business card on the table. Our private numbers, for when you're ready to talk, really talk. They filed out silently, leaving Rose and Spencer alone in the wake of a revelation that had shattered the foundations of their marriage and lives. 24 years, Spencer finally said, his voice hollow. 24 years, and I never knew this part of you existed. Rose reached for his hand, terrified he would pull away. I convinced myself it was in the past, that it would never matter again. And now, I have to decide whether I'm brave enough to face the truth, she whispered, or if I'll keep running from it like I've done my entire life. Outside the window, they could see the triplets stepping into a sleek black Bentley, 3 identical profiles silhouetted against the setting Atlanta sun. As the car pulled away, Rose couldn't shake the feeling that, regardless of her decision, nothing would ever be the same again. The drive home from the Auto Expo passed in tense silence. Rose stared out the passenger window, watching Atlanta's skyline glitter against the darkening sky as Spencer navigated through evening traffic. The business card Donald had given her seemed to burn in her purse, a physical reminder of the collision between past and present. When they finally reached their Buckhead mansion, Spencer headed straight for the bar in his study. I think we need something stronger than wine for this conversation, he said, pouring 2 glasses of bourbon. He handed one to Rose, who took it with trembling fingers. "I don't know where to begin," she whispered. Spencer sank into his leather chair. "The beginning would be good. All of it, Rose. No more secrets." The ice clinked in her glass as she took a fortifying sip and began the story she had buried for nearly 3 decades. "I met Jackson Lewis in an American literature class. He was brilliant, the kind of student who challenged professors and made everyone think deeper about the material. He wasn't like anyone I'd ever known." A wistful smile crossed her face at the memory. "We started studying together, and then, more." "Did you love him?" Spencer asked quietly. Rose met his eyes. "Yes, I did." "What happened?" "My parents happened. When I told them I was pregnant, my father exploded. Said Jackson was using me to climb socially. Called him terrible names." She shuddered at the memory. Mother was calmer but equally determined. "They presented it as protecting me, ensuring I could finish my education, have the right kind of future. They never once considered that I might want to keep my babies and be with Jackson." "Did he know you were pregnant?" Rose shook her head, tears welling. "No. My parents sent me to a health retreat in North Georgia, really a private facility for girls from good families who'd gotten themselves into trouble. I wrote Jackson a letter breaking things off, saying I needed to focus on my studies. It was the most cowardly thing I've ever done." She drained her glass before continuing. "After the babies were born, I was lost. The adoption papers were already prepared, 3 separate families, closed adoptions. My parents insisted it was best for everyone. These children need families that understand their heritage, my mother said, as if that justified everything. And after, I returned to Emory for spring semester. Everyone was told I'd been studying abroad. 6 months later, I met you." She reached for his hand. "I never told you because I wanted to forget it ever happened. I thought I had dealt with it, moved on." Spencer withdrew his hand, stood, and walked to the window. 24 years, Rose. We have daughters together. Were you ever going to tell me?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I convinced myself it was better buried. That dredging it up would only cause pain." "Well, it's certainly causing pain now," he said bitterly. "Those men are blackmailing us. If we don't acknowledge them publicly, they'll tank a deal worth millions to the firm. They're not just those men, Spencer. They're my sons. Sons you abandoned." The words landed like a physical blow. Rose flinched but didn't argue. "Yes," she said. Spencer's phone chimed with an email notification. He checked it, his expression darkening. "Colin Harrison just sent the revised contract terms. The deadline for our decision is 9 a.m. tomorrow." He tossed the phone onto his desk. "I need to make some calls." "To whom?" "Our lawyer, for starters. PR team next. If we're going to do this, we need to control the narrative." Rose stood, suddenly angry. "Is that all you care about? The business implications? What am I supposed to care about, Rose? The sons you never told me existed? The fact that my wife has been lying to me our entire marriage?" His voice rose with each question. "Or maybe I should focus on how I'm going to explain to our daughters that they have 3 half-brothers their mother gave away." The mention of their daughters drained the fight from Rose. "Yvonne and Jean," she murmured. "Oh God, how do I tell them?" "That's something you should have considered 27 years ago," Spencer replied coldly. He grabbed his keys from the desk. "I'm going to the office. I need to think." "Spencer, please." "Not now, Rose. Just not now." The front door closed with quiet finality, leaving Rose alone in the cavernous house that had once felt like a sanctuary but now seemed more like a beautiful prison of her own making. She poured another bourbon and carried it to the family room, where photographs chronicled the life she and Spencer had built, their wedding day, Yvonne's first ballet recital, Jean's high school graduation, family vacations in Aspen and the Amalfi Coast, a perfect family narrative with a crucial chapter missing. Rose's gaze lingered on a recent photo of her daughters, Yvonne's blonde hair and confident smile, so like Spencer's, Jean's more serious expression, reminiscent of Rose's own mother. Neither girl inherited her green eyes. Those had gone to the sons no one knew about, the sons who now held her future in their hands. With sudden resolution, Rose retrieved Donald's business card and dialed the number. "I didn't expect to hear from you so soon," Donald answered on the second ring. "We need to meet again. Just us. No Spencer, no business deals, just a mother and her sons." The words felt strange on her tongue, yet oddly right. A pause, then, Martin's penthouse. 1 hour. She arrived at the midtown high-rise precisely on time, dressed in a simple black dress rather than the designer gown she'd worn to the expo. The security guard called up, and she was directed to the private elevator that opened directly into the penthouse. All three brothers were waiting, though their earlier formal attire had been replaced with casual clothes that emphasized both their similarities and subtle differences, Donald in a chambray button-down, Colin in a simple black t-shirt, Martin in a polo that matched his eyes, her eyes. "Thank you for seeing me," Rose said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Would you like something to drink?" Martin offered, gesturing toward the bar. She shook her head. "I want a clear head for this conversation." The four of them sat in the living area, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the Atlanta skyline. The room was tastefully decorated in masculine tones of gray and blue, with several framed photographs Rose couldn't quite make out from where she sat. "I need to understand what you really want," she began. "Beyond the public acknowledgement, beyond the business deal with Spencer's firm. What do you want from me?" The brothers exchanged glances before Donald spoke. "When we first found each other, we spent months comparing our lives, looking for patterns, similarities, trying to understand nature versus nurture. We had different upbringings," Colin continued. "I was raised in Boston by university professors. Donald grew up in Chicago with a single mother who worked as an ER nurse. Martin's family owned a restaurant in Philadelphia. Different cities, different socioeconomic backgrounds. But we all ended up at prestigious universities," Martin added. "We all excelled academically. We all have the same analytical way of thinking and the same drive to succeed. And we all grew up with the same question," Donald said quietly. "Why didn't our birth mother want us?" The directness of the question made Rose's chest tighten. "It wasn't that I didn't want you," she whispered. "I was young and scared and completely under my parents' control." "Were you?" Colin challenged. "Or was it easier to let them make the hard decision, to walk away with your future intact while we were separated and scattered to different corners of the country?" "I'm not here to defend what I did," Rose said. "Nothing I say can undo the past or make up for what you lost. We didn't just lose you," Donald pointed out. "We lost each other. 20 years of brotherhood gone because separating us made the adoptions easier to arrange." Rose hadn't known that particular detail, and the revelation struck her like a physical blow. "I didn't, they never told me you'd be separated. Would it have made a difference?" Martin asked, his tone more curious than accusatory. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'd like to think so, but honestly, I was terrified and sheltered and completely unprepared to defy my parents. By the time I might have found the courage, it was too late." The adoptions were finalized. A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Martin stood and walked to one of the framed photographs, bringing it back to Rose. "This is Jackson, our father. It was taken about 5 years before he died." Rose's hands trembled as she accepted the frame. The young man she had loved had matured into a distinguished-looking professor with gray at his temples but with the same warm smile and intelligent eyes she remembered. Her vision blurred with tears. "He never married," Donald said softly. "Never had other children." "Did he?" Rose swallowed hard. Did he hate me? His sister told us he never spoke of you with bitterness, Martin replied. Only regret for what might have been. Rose traced Jackson's face through the glass. I've thought of him so often over the years, wondered where he was, what he became. He was a professor of African American literature at Howard University, Colin said. Published 3 books, won teaching awards, made a difference in his students' lives. He would have been proud of you, Rose whispered, looking up at her sons. All of you. We know, Donald replied with quiet confidence. We've built something meaningful together, but there's still a missing piece, you. As the meaning of his words sank in, Rose realized this meeting wasn't about revenge or blackmail or even public acknowledgement. It was about 3 men seeking connection with the mother they never knew. And perhaps, if she found the courage to take the next step, it could be about a mother reconnecting with the sons she had never allowed herself to mourn. Outside, lightning flashed across the Atlanta sky, a summer storm brewing on the horizon. Inside, the tension between them crackled with similar energy, the potential for destruction or renewal hanging in the balance of what would happen next. Rose set the framed photograph of Jackson back on the coffee table. When I got pregnant, I imagined a future for us, Jackson, me, and our baby. I didn't even know I was carrying triplets until my 5th month. She smiled faintly at the memory. The doctor's face when he saw the ultrasound, I thought he was going to fall over. But you still didn't reach out to our father, Colin observed, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. By then, my parents had already made all the arrangements. I was living at the facility in North Georgia, isolated from everyone I knew. Rose's hands twisted in her lap. They monitored my phone calls, my mail. When I tried to call Jackson from a payphone during a supervised trip to town, my mother's friend who was watching me caught me and took the phone away. They essentially imprisoned you, Donald said, his analytical mind putting the pieces together. It felt that way, yes, but I was also a coward, Rose admitted. I kept telling myself that once the babies, you, were born, I'd find a way to keep you, to contact Jackson. But when the time came, her voice trailed off. You were overwhelmed, Martin supplied, his expression softening slightly. She nodded. 3 tiny babies, no support, no job, no money of my own, no place to live except my parents' house. They controlled everything. So you signed the papers, Colin concluded. Yes, and then I did what my father always taught me to do with painful truths, I buried it deep and built a perfect life on top of the grave. Rose looked at each of them in turn. But seeing you tonight, it's as if the ground has split open. Martin leaned forward. Here's what I don't understand. You've had opportunities to find us over the years. The adoption records could have been unsealed with your consent. Rose's face flushed with shame. I convinced myself you were better off without me, that searching for you would only disrupt your lives. She paused. And I was afraid of facing what I'd done, of Spencer and the girls finding out. And now? Donald asked quietly. Now I'm still afraid, but I'm more afraid of losing this chance. She took a deep breath. I'll do it. Co-host your gala, acknowledge you publicly. Not because of the business deal, but because it's time for the truth. The brothers exchanged glances again, that silent communication Rose was beginning to recognize. There's something you should know, Martin finally said. The business deal with Powell Financial is real, and we do want you at the gala, but the deadline, the ultimatum. That was a test. A test? Rose echoed, confused. We needed to know if you would choose us for ourselves, not because we forced your hand, Donald explained. If you had refused, we wouldn't have tanked the deal, though we might have gone with another investment firm. Colin added with a slight smile, Rose didn't know whether to be relieved or angry. So, the blackmail was a bluff, she said. Not entirely, Martin clarified. We do want recognition. We do want a relationship with you, if that's something you want, too. But we're not the scared, abandoned children you might have imagined. We don't need to destroy your life to feel whole. A weight lifted from Rose's chest, only to be replaced by a new, heavier one. If they weren't forcing her hand, then the choice, and its consequences, was truly hers alone. Spencer may not forgive me for this, she said softly. That's between you and your husband, Donald replied. But if it helps, we respect him. We've been watching your family for some time, and he seems like a good man. The idea that they had been observing her family was unsettling, but Rose couldn't blame them for their curiosity. How much do you know about my life? We know you volunteer at the Children's Hospital every Wednesday, Martin said. That you sit on the board of 3 major charities, that you fought to get more scholarship funding for underprivileged students at your daughter's private school. You've been trying to atone, Donald observed, in your own way. Rose hadn't thought of her charitable work in those terms before, but perhaps they were right. I've tried to do good in the world. We know, Colin acknowledged, his tone softer than it had been all evening. That's partly why we decided to approach you now rather than years ago when we first found you. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing against the windows as lightning illuminated the city in brief electric moments. Inside, the atmosphere was changing too, the initial tension giving way to something more complex. I'd like to tell you about your father, Rose said suddenly. The Jackson I knew. And I'd like to hear about your lives, not just the highlights, but the real stories. For the next hour, they talked. Rose described meeting Jackson in the campus library, their first date at a tiny jazz club, the way he'd recite poetry when they walked across campus together. The triplets shared stories of their adoptive families, Donald's mother, who worked double shifts to send him to the right schools, Martin's childhood in his family's busy restaurant, Colin's intellectual upbringing with professors who challenged him constantly. We each had what we needed, Donald reflected. Different paths, but they all led us to where we are now. Together, Martin added with a meaningful look at Rose. The conversation flowed more easily as the night wore on, years of questions finally finding answers. Rose found herself laughing at some of their stories, tearing up at others. She saw echoes of Jackson in their mannerisms, glimpses of her own parents in their determination, and something entirely unique that belonged only to them. As midnight approached, Rose reluctantly stood. I should go. Spencer might be home by now. He's not, Colin said, checking his phone. He's still at his office. Our security team saw him there 20 minutes ago. Rose raised an eyebrow. Security team. We like to be thorough, Martin explained unapologetically. I'm beginning to understand how you've become so successful, she remarked dryly. Nothing left to chance. Almost nothing, Donald corrected. We couldn't predict how you would react tonight. I'm still figuring that out myself, Rose admitted. But I know I want to know you, all of you, if you'll let me. Martin walked her to the elevator. You should talk to Spencer, he advised. And your daughters, soon. I will, she promised. Tomorrow. The gala is in 3 weeks, he reminded her. If you're going to do this, everyone in your life should hear the truth from you first. Rose nodded, the reality of what lay ahead settling heavily on her shoulders. Will you be there when I tell my daughters? Martin looked surprised by the request. Do you want us to be? I think, yes. They should meet their brothers. As the elevator doors opened, Martin hesitated, then stepped forward and briefly embraced her. The contact was awkward, tentative, but it sent tears streaming down Rose's face. We'll be there, he promised. Just let us know when. The rain had stopped by the time Rose reached her car, but the streets were slick and shining under the streetlights. As she drove, her mind raced with thoughts of the conversations to come, with Spencer, with her daughters, with her friends and social circle. Each would require courage she wasn't sure she possessed. Her phone rang through the car's speaker system. Spencer's name appeared on the dashboard display. Rose, where are you? His voice was tight with strain. I've been calling.